Buddy. I hope that you are well, and I also hope that you are having a good day so far. Today, we'll be doing our grade 3 English lesson on abbreviations. And before we start with our lesson on abbreviations, you're going to log into aplusstudents.ca. Once we've logged on to aplusstudents.ca with our username as well as our password, and then we're going to select the subject of language arts, grade 3. And then we're going to scroll down to the chapter of abbreviations. All right, so we are doing the chapter of abbreviations. This is a continuation of the lesson that we did, or let's say this is a continuation of a previous lesson on abbreviations. So we're doing our chapter of abbreviations. The subject is English, which is language arts, grade 3. And the lessons that we are going to be focusing on under the chapter of grade 3 or under the chapter of abbreviations it's to abbreviate people's titles, also to abbreviate customer units of measurements, and we're also going to abbreviate metric units of measurements. And in our previous lesson, we basically abbreviated days of the week, and we abbreviated months of the year, right? And we specifically stated that an abbreviation is a short version of a word. And we mentioned that when we abbreviate days of the week, right, then we usually abbreviate it to the first three letters of the specific word. So the first 3 or 4 letters, let's put it like that. For example, Monday would be MON, Tuesday would be TUE, Wednesday would be WED. And when we abbreviate days of the week, then days of the week needs to start with a capital letter. The same with months of the year. When we abbreviate months of the year, then months of the year are also shortened, right? It's a shortened version of a specific word. And months of the year also starts with a capital letter. So it starts with a capital letter. And months of the year, it's basically written, it's either the first 3 or first 4 letters also of the month. If it is, for example, if the month is very short, right? If it's written very short, for example, May, June, and July, then we don't abbreviate it. All right. So now today we are continuating with abbreviations, and we are abbreviating people's titles. And when we abbreviate people's titles, right, firstly, we also say that an abbreviation is a short version of a specific word. And when we abbreviate people's titles, right, then we abbreviate people's titles usually in both formal as well as informal writing. So people's titles are often abbreviated in both formal as well as informal writing. So giving someone a specific title, right, or writing it in um, someone's title shouldn't just be formally, right? It's also informal because that is how the person wants to be addressed. So we don't just say Mr. because we are busy with a business meeting, but we also classify this person as Mr. So and so because for whatever reason. We don't just say, for example, doctor because we are going to see a medical doctor. But if we personally know the person and we know they are a doctor, right, we still classify them as doctor, both formally as well as informally. So if we look at a few common abbreviations for people's titles, right, then we can, for example, classify, like, identify someone as captain, right? It doesn't just have to be a captain of a ship or a captain of a boat. Sometimes we also call someone captain that works at a, for example, a police station. So then they want to be addressed as captain. Remember abbreviations? We start writing abbreviations with a capital letter. We said, for example, doctor, right? We shorten doctor as DR. And after every abbreviation of people's titles, we need to put a period. For example, if we are addressing someone as captain, instead of giving the full word captain, so instead of giving the full word captain, we can, for example, just shorten it by saying CAPT and period. And don't forget the period. The same with doctor. Doctor is DR, period. If, say, for example, um, usually if someone give the child's name Junior, right, or the title Junior after the child's name, then it's usually because it's either the name of the parent. Maybe the parent's name is John, and now they're giving the son's name also John. So now they'll say it's John Jr., and you'll basically get that title of JR, period. Mr. It's like saying Miss and Mr. So Mr. we abbreviate with MR, period. Private, right? Private Ryan, that we abbreviate by PVT and a period. The same with professor. Like when you go to the university, right, and you interact with the professor during your lecture times, and then people will usually call the professor by a shortened version by just saying prof. And maybe a reverend, right, from a specific church, we just say rev. Then we have saint, sergeant, even senator, right? Senator would be abbreviated for sen. And then senior, John Senior or John Junior. So that is basically when we abbreviate titles, right? People's titles. So we said an abbreviation is a short version of a specific word, and people's titles are often abbreviated in both formal and informal writing. And then we have units of measurements, right? And units of measurements, it's usually if you are, let's say, a good example would be when you are baking, right? Say, for example, you are baking and now you need to measure something either in teaspoons, tablespoons, ounces, right? Even when you measure, let's say, a specific pool, they'll tell you it is so many foot or so many feet deep, right? Just give me 1 second. Guys, can you still hear me? All right. I just quickly want to sort out something. It seems like my PC is freezing. All right, sorted. All right, so then we also have units of measurements, right? And units of measurements are often abbreviated in recipes. So if you are either baking something or you are cooking, or you need to make bread or something, and then we can use these type of units of measurements, right? So we can use units of measurements either in recipes as well as in informal writing, right? And here are some of the abbreviations for units of measurements. And I mentioned that, say, for example, you want to, for example, bake a cake, right? Then you can either say, okay, you need to use 2 tablespoons of, and there we shorten tablespoons also with a period at the end. If you need to throw in an X amount of teaspoons or salt, then you maybe put teaspoons, which is TSP period. So many gallons of water or gallons of liquid, so many inches. It is probably like 5 feet to or 10 feet down, right? And then we also have miles, ounces, which is oz, pence, pounds, quarts, as well as yards. That is how we measure units of measurements. And also, that is how it is abbreviated, followed by a period. And that does not have to be capitalized. And then also, we have units of measurements, right? So this is now metric units of measurements, right? And we can measure it according to so many millimeters, centimeters, meters, kilometers, milligrams, grams, kilograms, milliliters, liters, right? And like for example, your milliliters, millimeters, that's where you can maybe measure something as small as a fingernail, right? That is how small you can measure something. Centimeters, right? You can maybe measure with a ruler. You can either measure a book, can maybe measure a desk in centimeters. Then we have meters, right? Then we have like we use a meter stick. Maybe the space of a room we can measure with a meter stick. Something that is a bit lengthy we can measure with a meter stick. And kilometers, if you want to, usually when we are driving, we use kilometers. So it'll be like it is 15 kilometers from here to another town, or it will be 20 kilometers or 50 kilometers depending on the distance. And these units of, or metric units of measurements, we do not capitalize it and it does not end with a period. All right. And because these abbreviations are metric units, they do not end with a period. And that is why I said it is not capitalized and we do not end it with a period. All right, so this is our chapter on abbreviations, and we are doing our tutorial lesson on A plus students.ca. All right, and we're going into abbreviating people's titles, right? And we made mention that people's titles are often abbreviated in both formal as well as informal writing. And people's titles needs to be written with a capital letter, and it's a shortened version of a specific word, and it ends with a period. All right. So if we now look at this specific word, right? It says we need to abbreviate the person's title within the sentence. Cal Ripken Sr. played baseball for the Baltimore Orioles and his two sons did too. So that underlined word senior, we need to write that in, we need to abbreviate that. And if we look at the word senior, right, and if we abbreviate the word senior, then if we abbreviate senior, it will be SR as well as a period. So this is how we write senior, or this is how we abbreviate the word senior. All right. So now we are going to abbreviate the person's title. It says Saint Patrick, who is honored every March 17, lived over 1,005 years ago, or 1,500 years ago. And if we abbreviate the word saint, or let's say the title saint, right? And then the abbreviation of the title saint is capital letter S, T, and a period. All right. So this is how we write saint in an abbreviation form. We capitalize the S, T lowercases, and we have a period. Right? All right, so now we're going to our test where we're going to abbreviate people's titles. We need to abbreviate the people's titles. The word that is underlined and in green. It is St. Patrick, who is honored every March 17, lived over 1,500 years ago. So we need to give the abbreviation. Is it the first option, which is ST period, or the second option is R period for saint? So option one or option two, where we abbreviate the person's title, which is saint. All right, so if we abbreviate the people's titles or the person's title, which is Saint Patrick, right? Then we're going to choose the first option, which is ST period. So well done to that person who got ST period. Then private, right? Private Sarah Emma Edmonds fought in the Civil War using the name Franklin Thompson. So Private Sarah Emma Edmonds fought in the Civil War using the name Franklin Thompson. So the word private for Private Sarah, is it just PRI or PVT period? Private, right? Remember we said that the title needs to be capitalized as well as the last word needs to end with a period. I really don't know how to change it from being blurry. All right, so if we're going to look at the word private Sarah, and then we're going to say PVT for private. So PVT for private, not PRI. We need to abbreviate Mr. in Did you invite Mr. Mendoza and his family to your Memorial Day get together? So how do we write Mr.? How do you abbreviate Mr.? Is it the first option which is Mr. MR period or Mrs. MRS period? And remember, when you write the abbreviation of a title, do not forget to add the period. So if you're saying Mr., then it needs to be Mr. with a period. All right, so if we choose the correct abbreviation, we will go with the first option, which is Mr. And well done, Mr. is correct. Is the book group meeting at Professor Hensley's house this week? So, Professor, is it the first option, which is prof, period, or pro, period? For professor, professor. I even made an example when I made mention of titles and I mentioned professor. Then I made an example of what they call our professor at the lecture room. So basically, if we abbreviate people's titles, right? And then it's going to be prof, PROF, and then a period. All right, so we abbreviate customary units of measurements, right? And we said we customize it by if we are baking. So we'll use these measurements in either baking or just informally, right? And we made mention of feet, gallons, inches, miles, ounces, pints, pounds, just LB, quarts, tablespoons, teaspoons, and yards. All right, let's go to our test where we are going to abbreviate units of measurements. And units of measurements, right? They're saying we need to have 1 yard. If we abbreviate yard, is it YD or YR? And if we select the abbreviation, and then we will say it's YD period. Capital letter Y, D, and period. All right. And if we abbreviate the units of measurements for pounds, is it PO for pounds or LB for pounds? And if we abbreviate the units of measurements, we're going to go with LB for pounds. And well done, guys. Well done. We need to abbreviate inch. So inches. And if we abbreviate and measure inches. Oh, it is IN. I apologize. IN for inches. So IN is for inches, not INC. Teaspoon. If we want to measure a teaspoon, is it 1 TSP or TS for teaspoon? So teaspoon. And if you measure teaspoon, it will be option 1, which is TSP, all lower cases. And if we abbreviate units of measurements, for example, gallons, is it the first one or the second option? Gallon. So 1 gallon, we need to abbreviate the word gallon. So gallon. So gallons, right? And gallons, we're going to say, let's quickly go with the second option. And the second option is correct. All right, so this is now the end of my lesson on abbreviations. And we said abbreviations are a shortened. All right. So basically this is the end of our lesson on abbreviations. Thank you very much for joining our class and thank you very much for being part of the lesson. Till next time. Goodbye.